what do you think we're doing today?
The story I'm about to tell you is a true one. It happened to me in the early 1980s, long before anyone talked about reptilians in public. This particular night, I was lying in bed, trying to go to sleep. After a while, I drifted into the stage between awake and asleep, where you are still aware of your environment, but are slowly entering dreamland. Suddenly, I felt the room was getting icy cold, and my hair stood right up on my neck and arms. I remember opening my eyes, and then I was awake and clear in an instant. The room got even colder. I noticed I was paralyzed and I couldn't move a single muscle in my body. I had a very eerie feeling in my stomach. Then, out of nowhere, a horrible creature appeared in the opposite part of the room, close to the bedroom door. In retrospect, I can see that the creature looked similar to how people describe the reptilian race. Thick, naked, and green, totally hairless, and extremely muscular, with his spine sticking up underneath his skin. This is something I noticed when he was bending down, ready to attack. I can't remember clearly what his nose and his ears looked like, but I vaguely recall that he had pointy ears. I just knew he was a male, although I don't remember seeing any genitals. His eyes were ruby red and glowed viciously. I estimate his height to be about 6.5 feet, but his body structure was thicker and bigger than a human. He had more teeth than we do, from what I can recall, and they were very long, sharp, and pointy. His mouth was huge. I can't say whether he had a tail or not because I never saw him from behind, and I saw no wings either. This creature was definitely physical, at least after he had transformed into our reality. At the time, I had no other way of describing him other than as a demon, knowing nothing about reptilians at the time. This creature was staring at me for I don't know how long, but it feels like it was maybe half a minute. All the while I still couldn't move or scream. He suddenly started growling, and before I knew it, he was over me in my bed, now furiously roaring. His big ice-cold hands grabbed my neck, trying to strangle me. He was extremely strong and heavy, and one of his knees put an enormous weight on my chest. I recall I could feel his breath in my face, but I can't remember how it smelled. Probably because I was choking. I was thinking, my God, this is it. I'm dead. I couldn't breathe at all due to him strangling me, and all the time he was roaring loudly and furiously. I remember my next thought was, what's going to happen now? Where will this creature take me? To hell? I was horrified, but I couldn't do anything. Even if I wasn't paralyzed, there was nothing I could do. This creature was much too strong for any human being to fight. His strength was probably at least 10 times the strongest man on Earth. The creepiest thing was that this reptilian-looking creature literally sucked out my life energy and swallowed it. And I knew it was just a matter of seconds before I was going to pass out. I mentally prepared myself to die, or worse. Then I heard a long swooshing sound, and in the blink of an eye, the creature disappeared into thin air. I was no longer paralyzed and sat up in my bed, desperately catching my breath, coughing and choking. My heart was pounding like a hammer in my chest, and I could still feel the tightness around my neck and the pressure on my chest from his knee. The room was still ice cold, but slowly went back to normal room temperature. I can't remember if I went back to sleep that night or not, but I was sore for days after the incident. I awoke one night in a state which I can only describe as a spasm. My body was in a rigid state. I could not move a muscle, and I felt like something was on top of me. I fought to get movement back in my body. I could not turn my head or move at all. It was like I was having a fight to get control of my body. After a few panic-stricken moments, I could just barely move my fingers, only a little bit. I then felt that there was more than just a spasm. I felt dirty and touched. It was a horrible feeling from deep inside me. My throat felt like it was being held. I could feel something was on top of me. My hands were by my side, but it felt like they were around my own throat, holding tightly. I was using all my might to break free from this spasmodic state. Then I could feel something breathing into my left ear. A sound of a growl-like noise right next to my ear. I struggled to move my head to the left, like breaking free from a stranglehold. I could barely see the outline of a head, a big long head, next to my own face. As the spasm-like feeling started to wear off, a tiny bit at a time, I could work out that this thing on top of me looked like a lizard, or a newt type thing. It was like a blending together of all that was around it, kind of invisible. I could see it more clearly as the seconds passed. It was a reptilian. I growled at it, or I think I did. My mind and my body gave all it could do to do so. I bared my teeth at it, and I could feel that it could read my mind. I was swearing at it and shouting all sorts of obscenities at it. I felt violated and used. The next thing, it was quickly off me, and was standing to one side of the bottom of my bunk bed. A light came through the thin gap in the curtains. There were different shades of a golden light which also had very small particles inside it, like dust or small stars which moved around like little bright lights. This reptilian creature was about 6 feet tall. I could sense it was either proud or happy with itself, or maybe both. I tried to sit up as best I could, and through my mind, I swore at it again. The creature walked forward and stepped into the light beam. As it did, the feet and legs vanished into the light. The more the creature moved forward towards the window, the more of it vanished. After it was gone, I felt relaxed, but I could still feel where I was held around my throat. I felt I was raped by this horrendous monster. I awoke during the night to see a reptoid being, about human size, sitting on the pillow next to my head. Needless to say, I was frozen with shock to see someone there. The next thing that happened seemed almost instinctual and just came out of me. I started growling at him like a wild animal, and I kept saying, "Get out," through my clenched teeth. He looked at me in surprise. It took him over a minute to realise what I was saying to him. Yes, I growled for that long. He went from looking glad to be with me to a kind of, "oh shit," realisation. He then hopped over me to the side of the bed and quickly put his finger on my forehead. Then he disappeared, and I was calm again. Afterwards, I felt ashamed for acting that way, because it was obvious that he was not an aggressive being, and just seemed like he wanted to chat, but my animal instinct kicked in. I looked at the empty space he once occupied, and laughed at how barbaric I acted. Then I said aloud, "Sorry about that. Next time you want to meet me, don't just pop into my bedroom and sit on my bed. Knock on the door, and I'll let you in for some tea."
Kaya o tebe mo kaya o tebe no konta uru bo churbe mi pakuta vitana roni yontana.
I became aware of my brain. I felt physically that it had become compartmentalized into 4 separate and distinct levels. At the uppermost surface was the observer and commander, which was conscious of the condition of my body. It perceived, but purely as a spectator, the visions emanating from what seemed to be the nether portions of my brain. Immediately below the topmost layer, I felt a numbed layer, which seemed to be put out of commission by the drug. It just wasn't there. The next level down was the source of my visions. Now I was virtually certain I was going to die. As I tried to accept my fate, an even lower portion of my brain began to transmit more visions and information. I was told that this new material was being presented to me because I was dying and therefore safe to receive these revelations. These were the secrets reserved for the dying and the dead, I was informed. I could only very dimly perceive the givers of these thoughts. Giant reptilian creatures reposing sluggishly at the lowermost depths of the back of my brain, where it met the top of the spinal column. I could only vaguely see them in what seemed to be gloomy, dark depths. They then projected a visual scene in front of me. First, they showed me the planet Earth as it was eons ago, before there was any life on it. I saw an ocean, a barren land, and a bright blue sky. Then black specks dropped from the sky by the hundreds and landed in front of me on the barren landscape. I could see now that the specks were actually large, shiny black creatures with stubby, pterodactyl-like wings and huge whale-like bodies. Their heads were not visible to me. They flopped down, utterly exhausted from their trip, resting for eons. They explained to me in a kind of thought language that they were fleeing from something out in space. They had come to the planet Earth to escape their enemy. The creatures then showed me how they had created life on the planet in order to hide within the multitudinous forms and thus disguise their presence. Before me, the magnificence of plant and animal creation and speciation, hundreds of millions of years of activity took place on a scale and with a vividness impossible to describe. I learned that the dragon-like creatures were thus inside all forms of life, including man. They were the true masters of humanity and the entire planet, they told me. We humans were but the receptacles and servants of these creatures. For this reason, they could speak to me from within myself. I suddenly felt my distinctive humanness, the contrast between my species and the ancient reptilian ancestors, who were beginning to feel increasingly alien and possibly evil. Each heartbeat was a major undertaking. I turned to human help. Michael then manages to communicate with his Kanibo Indian guides, who administer an antidote which brings him out of his trip. When he first wakes, he can remember everything about the experience except the secret that the Reptilians told him. After some concerted effort, he does recall everything. A day or two later, he visits a Kanibo shaman. I was now eager to solicit a professional opinion from the most supernaturally knowledgeable of the Indians, a blind shaman who had made many excursions in the spirit world with the aid of the ayahuasca drink. It seemed only proper that a blind shaman should be my guide to the world of darkness. I went to his hut, taking my notebook with me, and described my visions to him segment by segment. At first, I told him only the highlights. Thus, when I came to the dragon-like creatures, I skipped over their arrival from space and only said, there were these giant bat animals, something like great bats, longer than the length of this house, who said that they were the true masters of the world. There is no word for dragon in Kanibo, so giant bat was the closest I could come to describe what I had seen. The shaman stared up toward me with his sightless eyes and said with a grin, "Ah, they're always saying that, but they are only masters of outer darkness," as he waved his hand casually toward the sky. I felt a chill along the lower part of my spine, for I had not yet told him that I had seen them in my trance coming from outer space.